Hello, welcome to PJ Does Life. I'm PJ. Yep, it's me. This is me doing life. Now I'm going to talk today about the false dichotomies which arise from our conceptual separation from nature, which, by the way, is why we give nature a label as distinct from us. And it generates these false dichotomies which I see all around me. One such example is in child rearing, where it's seen that either you succeed in gaining control over your offspring or you fail to gain control. So this is the pattern I see again and again and again, with a few notable exceptions, and there are some increasingly so, I'm glad to say. It's whether you can gain control or you fail, they're seen as different results. But in truth, they are equal failures because they both arise from the same paradigm of control. The same control which began in agriculture when we started planting seeds and trying to control nature, and our attempt to do that, and the resulting collective delusion that we are therefore separate from nature. But they're two sides of exactly the same coin. The goal of child rearing in civilization is to take a whole being that is born whole and springing forth and a part of nature, as we all are, and rip it from those moorings and shove it kicking and screaming into a member of society, dependent not on its evolutionary knowledge and innate sense of rightness and belonging, but on artificial forms of external controls such as time, for example. But in reality, it's nothing less than a brutal indoctrination because, and here's why I say brutal, by putting it into the cultural delusion that we're apart from nature, it necessarily distances the being from the knowledge, and I mean this in the deepest sense, that they are as much a part of nature as any other animal. And so at dinner parties everywhere, you hear endless debates about letting Tommy get away with it, letting them get their own way, or, but he wants this, but Billy wants this. And the result? Well, either children are afraid of their parents, or parents are afraid of their children. This is why winning control or failing to win control is really an experience on the same limited dimension, the dimension of control, the paradigm of control. There are, however, cultures, some still alive today, not many, but some, where the game of control is never played. As such, there are no terrible twos, no crazed 7-year-olds, no rebellious adolescents or misbehaving children, as Jean Leadoff described in her book The Continuum concept, and the first video I did was on that, so check that out. It's not because control has been won or lost in these cultures, but simply that the game of control was never played, because there's nothing for the child to be other than simply to be. No cultural indoctrination, no becoming a functioning member of society based on time as it is, and a delusional society at that. So there is no fight, there's no they have to learn, and there's no getting their own way, because there is no their own way, there's just way. There is no breaking of the spirit, which is an absolute routine in our civilized society. And the other false dichotomy that comes from this is the belief that a child, a being, will either be mollycoddled and unindependent, unable to cope with the world as it is, or be riddled with abandonment issues and grow up feeling alone and solitary. So the latter seems to be favoured in this delusional view of the world as dog eat dog, as they say. But most reasonable people would answer that one should have a balance between the two. But in choosing that, they don't realise that they are merely two sides of the same coin. Both arise from and contribute to the cultural ideology of separation from nature. And it is an ideology, because it's not true that we're separate from nature, although we behave like it. So it's time for another thought experiment. If you missed the thought experiment I did about Hitler, good one, that one, check that out too. See my video list. So imagine two children. One of them is mollycoddled by her overprotective parents, who won't let her explore, get hurt, fall over, taste things, or experience the world. The fear neurosis of the mother seeps into the infant, who exists with the fear of everything but her mother's arms, and even then, fear is the default state. So this child grows up with the neurosis that the world is dangerous and alien. The only safe place is in mummy's arms. The world is not home for this being. She is a stranger in a strange place, and being in this place is not right in the deepest level and in the deepest sense of the word. So the second child is left alone to scream itself to sleep. It's underloved and abandoned in the belief by its parents that it will create a more independent child. These are the same kind of people who encourage self-soothing and cry it out, and other deludedly well-meaning but ultimately sadistic and profoundly damaging practices, which really are the hallmark of our civilization. This child grows up with the neurosis that she is all alone. There's no home, there's no safety, there's no place where she feels herself and at comfort. And these beliefs are deeper than concepts, really, because they were formed in the mind before language had time to develop and before it started to arise. They may lead to a perfectly normal life, of course, normal by our standards, but there, underneath, is the inexplicable and unexplainable and something you can't say, is this loneliness and isolation. From the limited paradigm of the cultural indoctrination, it looks as if these two beings are experiencing the world in opposite ways. One of them, this isolation, one of them, this fear. But once you've been enlightened by the truth, you get to realize that they are merely experiencing the same thing at different ends. Both children grow up with something very strong in common. They grow up with the deepest sense, deeper than words or concepts can ever express, that the earth is not home for them, that they do not belong and there is no rightness in their being. So they have this in common. But a balance between these two extreme states remains on the same limited and insane dimension of experience. There are cultures, however, who have not left their evolutionary needs unfulfilled and raise beings who have an absolute foundational knowledge that the earth is in fact their home and is in fact their mother. In reality, the most independent beings actually spend the most time in arms in infancy, not absorbing the fear neurosis of her mother, but being casually carried as tasks are completed by her parents, getting to know and experience the world firsthand, so it becomes home in the deepest sense. This avoids another aspect of separation, that we're either in this time or that time, baby time or work time, playtime, it all joins together. The result of this behaviour is a being who knows that they will always have security and will always have their place because the world is their home, so they may explore the world freely and without irrational neurotic fears, since they are always at home. From this perspective, they are never left alone and neither are they sheltered from the world, so they do not fit anywhere on this limited dimension of abandonment to mollycoddling. They're on a completely different dimension, and a more basic dimension, in fact. Thus, this false dichotomy evaporates and is seen as another projection of cultural indoctrination. Another false dichotomy which I've mentioned is the idea on which our civilization is built, man versus nature. As anybody who knows anything about biology will tell you, man is, in fact, part of nature through and through. Yet we accept the difference between those who are one with nature and those who don't like nature as something quite superficial, but only because the false ideology of separation masks the truth of the matter. Mankind is a part of nature, and therefore those who are not at one with nature, which is most of us in civilization, are really not at one with themselves, since we are a part of nature. The result of this? Myriad of miserable people around the earth, knowing instinctively, somehow deep down, that this is not the way it's meant to be, but not knowing why. And so in the meantime making enemies of themselves with further labels such as depression, or my least favourite one, the human condition. Yet more labels of separation born of ignorance about the truth. In a previous video I talked about spirituality from an evolutionary standpoint, and another false dichotomy which has been plaguing mankind for millennia is this idea of the material world versus the spiritual world. It's easy enough to see how this might have come about. In our hearts we know instinctively that this isn't the way it's meant to be. But unable to pinpoint the source of this, we imagine that since this isn't how it's meant to be, we know deep down it's not, it must be how it is meant to be somewhere else, somewhere other. Before the days of separation, there wasn't this Cartesian dualism between the material and spiritual world. It was in the days of animism, when matter itself was spiritual, though not in the sense that we mean it of containing some kind of other ethereal essence. This ideological divide tends to manifest today in the apparent opposition between the religious and the materialists. So, if somebody has a spiritual experience, the religious will say that it is the celestial domain communicating through that person, whereas the materialist will declare otherwise, pointing perhaps to demonstrable evidence of a change in brain activity. The two opposing views, lost as they are in the ideology of separation, would never imagine that they have this thread in common, either a belief that there is some kind of spiritual world, or that it has rational and ultimately materialistic explanations. You see, either way, it's the limited paradigm of the mentality of separation, which is the foundation of civilization. Need I go on? Well, I'll mention one more, the idea of work versus leisure, which has sprung up as another manifestation of the mentality of separation and the conversion of our time into money, and it's been getting much, much worse over the last century or so, as our population has been exponentially increasing. We can't imagine that work could be leisure and leisure could be work, except those lucky few artists or those whose hobbies have become their jobs. There are numerous reasons why this dichotomy between work and leisure has emerged, and it's too many to go into now. But the mechanization of human life, which has evolved from our indoctrinated belief that we are separate from nature, has resulted in a similarly illusory wall division of work versus play, work compared to leisure. The division is an inevitable progression of our economic system, which also exponentially divides the rich from the poor, by the way. Yet more separation, resulting in our experience of life now that seems almost natural to us, and I use that in the loosest sense. We work, we play, by natural I should say habitual. We work, we play, and never the two shall meet. But this division is cultural, and not innate to human beings. Again, this idea of the human condition, or humans seem to ... I can point to both our past and some contemporary societies, some that exist, although not for long, where such a conceptual divide between work and play doesn't exist, because all work is for the sake of their lives, and for the sake of community, and not for the sake of money. Working together is the same as playing together. Anyway, if I get any deeper into this, the video threatens to last for hours and hours, so I'll leave it there for now, although I will come back to that topic later on. Alright, I'm PJ, this is me doing life. Go and do life.